Obina, sarcastic. Okafor, you're still carrying that school bag for your daughter? Ah. You mean you're still wasting money on that girl? Mama Ifioma, scoffing. This man no get sense. Instead of training a son to help him in the farm, he's training a girl to go and marry and forget him. Tufia. Emeka, laughing hard. He go suffer finish, then one small boy from another family go come marry the girl and enjoy the fruit of his labor. D era. They all burst into cruel laughter. Okafor says nothing. He just grips the bag tighter, eyes fixed ahead, and walks on slowly. Obina, yelling after him. When hunger finish you, don't come beg us oh. Father of the year. Okafor, softly. Let her fly. That's all I want. Let my Adis fly. Okafor's life had never been easy. When his wife, Ngozi, died giving birth to Adis, the world seemed to collapse around him. He was left with nothing but the memory of her smile and a tiny infant in his arms. But he promised her, as she lay in the hospital bed, that he would give their daughter everything she needed to succeed. Adis grew quickly, smarter than any child in the village. At 5 years old, she could already read and write better than most adults in Mwahia. Every time she came home from school, her eyes sparkled with excitement as she read stories to her father, and Okafor would listen with pride. But the laughter of the villagers grew louder. You're wasting your money on a girl, they would say. When she grows up, she'll just marry and leave you. What's the point? Why not send your son to school? One of them, Obina, the village tailor, would mock. A girl will never bring you back what you invested in her. She'll get married and forget you. But Okafor paid them no mind. He had no son to send to school, and Adis was the future. She was everything. Okafor worked as a palm wine tapper, crawling up trees every day, tapping for the sweet sap that would later become the village's favorite drink. It was hard work, but it paid the bills and fed his daughter. Every evening, he would return home exhausted, his muscles sore, but Adis' voice would lift his spirits. Her dreams of becoming a doctor or a lawyer, of changing the world, kept him going. I will make you proud, Papa, Adis would say, her hands holding his. One day, I'll be someone who can help you. Okafor would smile. I know, my dear. You will fly higher than any of them. But the path was not easy. As Adis got older, the cost of her education increased. School fees, uniforms, books, everything became a burden on Okafor's already frail shoulders. Yet, he refused to let go of the dream. He sold his goats. He sold the old bicycle his father had left him. Then came the hardest decision of all. When the school fees came due, and Okafor had nothing left to sell, he went to the village headman, Ease, and asked for a loan. Ease, please, Okafor begged. Help me. I must send my daughter to school. Ease, who owned half the village's land, looked at Okafor with cold eyes. You want to send a girl to school? It's a waste, Okafor. You'll regret it. But since you are like a brother to me, I will lend you some money. But remember, you'll have to pay me back every single kobo. Okafor didn't hesitate. He agreed without thinking twice. The money was enough to pay for Adis' school fees, but it came with a heavy price. The debt would hang over his head like a dark cloud for years to come. The day Adis left for school, the villagers gathered to see her off. They stood in groups, whispering as they watched Okafor carry his daughter's small suitcase. See the fool, one villager whispered. He's wasting all his money on her. By the time she gets married, he'll be forgotten. Just wait, another voice echoed. In a few years, Okafor will be begging for scraps from other villagers. But Okafor didn't hear their mockery. His heart swelled with pride as Adiz hugged him tightly before she boarded the bus that would take her away. "Don't worry, Papa," she said, her eyes bright with hope. "I'll study hard, and I'll make sure you don't regret this." "I know, my daughter," Okafor replied, wiping away a tear. "I know you will make me proud." The bus drove off, and Okafor stood there, watching it disappear into the distance. The village was quiet for a moment, but then the laughter began again. "It's so funny," one voice said. "Okafor has wasted all his savings, and for what? A girl who will leave him." But Okafor didn't care. He walked back to his hut, the burden of his choices heavy on his shoulders, but his heart filled with hope. As the years passed, Okafor's life became a daily struggle. He couldn't afford the doctor's visits when he fell ill. He barely had enough to eat. But he never stopped believing in Adiz. Every time a letter arrived from her, he would read it over and over again. She was excelling in school, winning scholarships, and sending every penny she could back home. Despite the hardships, Okafor never complained. He never gave up on his daughter. He knew, deep down, that one day, she would make him proud. He believed that Adiz would fly higher than any of them. The days blurred together in Umuahia, and Okafor's struggle to keep Adiz in school became more difficult with each passing month. As the seasons changed and the rains came, Okafor's situation worsened. The small patches of farmland he had, barely enough to feed himself, were no longer yielding enough to support both him and his daughter's education. The village had started to forget about Adiz. Her name was no longer mentioned in the same breath as other children who had stayed behind to help their families. The villagers' laughter grew louder with each passing year. One evening, as Okafor sat outside his hut, his back aching from the day's work, a thought gnawed at him. He had no more animals left to sell. His tools were worn down, his clothes ragged, and his house, a tiny, mud-walled hut, was barely standing. Yet, every month, the school fees were due, and Adiz's future hung in the balance. He could not give up now. That night, he lay awake, staring at the stars through the hole in the roof. He could hear the laughter of the villagers in the distance, their voices mocking him, but he blocked them out. Adiz needed him. He had to find a way to send her back to school. The next morning, Okafor made a decision. He walked through the village, carrying the last thing he owned of value, his father's ancient machete. It had been passed down through generations, a symbol of his family's strength and heritage. But Okafor knew that it would not save him now. His father's machete would have to be sold. As he walked to the village market, his heart weighed heavy. The villagers watched him pass, whispering behind their hands. "See him," one of them said. "Now he's selling his father's inheritance. This man has truly lost his mind." But Okafor did not hear them. He stepped into the market square and approached the blacksmith, who was known for trading in tools and weapons. "I need to sell it," Okafor said, his voice steady but strained. "My father's machete." The blacksmith looked at him, his eyes widening slightly. "This? The blade that your father used to cut down the sacred tree? Are you sure, Okafor? This is the last of your family's legacy." "I'm sure," Okafor replied, his hands trembling as he held out the machete. "I need the money. For my daughter's education." The blacksmith shook his head. "You know, people will laugh at you for this. A man sells his father's blade for a girl's education. It's unheard of." "I've heard it all before," Okafor said, his voice firm. "But this is what I must do." The blacksmith sighed and took the machete. After a brief exchange, Okafor walked away with a small sum of money, enough to cover the next school fees for Adiz. But as he walked back to his hut, the weight of his decision began to sink in. The villagers were right. He was sacrificing his family's legacy for a dream. That night, as he prepared to send the money to Adis, he sat alone by the fire, his eyes fixed on the flickering flames. His stomach growled with hunger, but he didn't eat. His thoughts were with Adis. Would she appreciate the sacrifices he was making? Would she ever understand? He had no choice but to hope. As the weeks passed, Okafor continued to struggle. His body weakened from hunger and exhaustion. He spent long hours tapping palm trees, but the effort hardly yielded enough to survive. Every time he sold a few gallons of palm wine, he used the proceeds to send a portion to Adis, who, despite her studies, always found a way to send something back to him. Letters came, often filled with excitement. Adis had passed her exams. She had been selected for another scholarship. She had become the pride of Zaria Secondary School. But each letter also carried the unspoken burden of Okafor's sacrifices. She didn't know how much he was suffering. She didn't know that his health was deteriorating. She didn't know that every day he spent working in the palm fields, his strength was fading. The villagers continued to mock him, telling him it was foolish to keep sending a girl to school. She'll just end up like all the others, they said. She'll marry someone in the city and forget you. But Okafor never wavered. Every time he thought of Adis, his heart filled with hope. He believed that one day, she would return to lift him up. That day would come. He was certain of it. One morning, as Okafor sat at the foot of a palm tree, wiping the sweat from his brow, he was approached by Ease, the village headman. Ease had heard of Okafor's struggles, and with a sympathetic smile, he offered to lend him money to pay off his debts. But Okafor shook his head. I don't want charity, he said firmly. I'm doing this for my daughter. I will not accept help from anyone. Ease raised an eyebrow, a touch of surprise in his voice. You're a proud man, Okafor. I admire that. But sometimes pride doesn't feed a hungry belly. I will feed my belly with hope, Okafor replied. My Adis will be the one to take care of me. As the years went by, Okafor's body grew frail, but his heart remained strong. He continued to send Adis to school, despite the villagers' mockery and the pain in his bones. Every night, as he lay in his dark, quiet hut, he would pray for her success. He would pray that one day, Adis would come back and see him for the man he was, a father who had done everything for her. He believed, with all his heart, that one day, she would come back. And when that day came, everything would be worth it. The months turned into years, and as Adis' voice grew fainter in Okafor's life, the letters she sent became his lifeline. Each one arrived like a small beacon of light in the darkness of his small, decaying hut. As Okafor's strength waned and the whispers of the villagers grew louder, these letters were his only comfort. They were his connection to the world outside the village, the world that Adis was conquering, step by step. Adis had made it into Zaria University, one of the best institutions in Nigeria. The day the acceptance letter came was one Okafor would never forget. He had almost collapsed from exhaustion that day, his knees weak from a long day of tapping palm wine. But when Adis' letter arrived, it was like a rush of life coursing through him. My beloved Papa. The letter began, her handwriting as beautiful as ever. I cannot begin to explain how happy I am to be accepted into Zaria University. This is the first step to fulfilling the dream you have worked so hard for. The dream of seeing me become someone who can change the world. I promise you, I will not disappoint you. I will make you proud. Just please, keep praying for me. With each word, Okafor felt the weight of his sacrifices lifting. Every time he thought of the struggles he faced, losing his land, his father's machete, his dignity in the eyes of the villagers, he found solace in these letters. Adis' words were his fuel, keeping him alive and pushing him to continue despite the constant mockery. But the journey was not easy for Adis either. She had to work multiple jobs to make ends meet while attending school. She taught younger students English in exchange for food, cleaned the dormitories, and did odd jobs in the library. Despite the exhaustion, Adiz excelled. She was a top student, consistently receiving scholarships and awards. One evening, after receiving yet another scholarship for her studies, Adiz wrote, "Papa, I have something to tell you. I've been selected for a scholarship to study abroad. I know this is a big step, and I will be far away from you, but I know this is the only way to honor everything you have done for me. I will continue to make you proud." Okafor read the letter over and over again, the tears streaming down his face. A scholarship to study abroad? His little girl was going places, bigger than he had ever dreamed. The hope that Adiz would one day return and make everything right kept him going. He would lie down at night, staring at the ceiling, imagining the day she would walk through the door as a successful woman, ready to take care of him. But as Adiz climbed higher, the gap between them grew wider. There was a strange, bittersweet feeling every time Okafor received a letter. On one hand, he was proud. His daughter was making something of herself, fulfilling the dreams he had held for so long. On the other hand, he felt the loneliness creeping in. Adiz's life was moving forward, and his own was slowly crumbling. The villagers took every opportunity to remind him that Adiz was probably forgetting him, too. "She's probably too busy to think of you," one of them would say. "She's probably living the good life now, while you're here, wasting away." But Okafor would smile quietly to himself. Adiz was still his daughter. She was still the little girl he had raised, the one who had promised him that she would make him proud. No matter how far away she was, his love for her remained unshaken. In the quiet of his hut, Okafor would often reflect on the sacrifices he had made. There were nights when hunger gnawed at his stomach, but he would think of Adiz and find the strength to carry on. He could feel the weight of his years pressing down on him, but as long as Adiz was succeeding, he knew his sacrifices hadn't been in vain. One day, Okafor received a letter that shook him to his core. It was from Adiz, but the tone had changed. This letter was different. There were no celebrations or promises. Instead, it was a letter filled with deep sorrow. "Papa," the letter began, "I have news that will break your heart. I have been offered a position in a prestigious medical program abroad, but I have to leave immediately. I know you have always dreamed of me becoming a doctor, but I never realized how much I would miss you until this moment. I want to be with you, to take care of you, but I have to follow this path, Papa. I hope you understand. I promise I will come back to see you soon." Okafor read those words over and over again, each sentence making him ache deeper. She was leaving. His daughter, the one he had sacrificed everything for, was leaving him again. This time, it felt permanent. The realization hit him like a thunderclap. She was becoming too successful to need him anymore. But even in that moment of sadness, Okafor couldn't be angry. He understood. This was what he had wanted for her, to see her soar. But a part of him felt lost, as if he was fading into the background of her life. He folded the letter carefully and placed it in his drawer, next to the others. He would cherish it, just as he had cherished every letter she had sent. But in his heart, there was an emptiness that no words could fill. And so, as the years passed, Okafor continued to work, continued to hope, and continued to believe that one day, just one day, his daughter would return. The letters had stopped coming as frequently, but Okafor held on to the belief that Adiz was still out there, becoming the person he had always dreamed she would be. Time had not been kind to Okafor. His body, once strong and capable, was now frail and worn. The years of hard labor, the endless hours spent in the palm fields and the backbreaking work he had done to send Adiz to school, had taken their toll. His joints ached constantly, and his back screamed with pain every time he stood. He had lost the sharpness in his eyes, the energy in his movements, and his once sturdy hands now trembled slightly as they gripped his tools. Each morning, Okafor struggled to rise from his mat. His legs felt heavy as if they were made of stone, and the old ache in his chest, a lingering reminder of the many sacrifices he had made, gnawed at him. But every time he thought of Adiz, a spark of hope reignited within him. His love for her was the last thread holding him together. The villagers, however, were relentless in their mockery. They saw Okafor's decline and whispered in hushed tones. Some laughed openly, as if his suffering was some sort of cosmic joke. "Look at him now," one of them said. "A man who sold everything for a daughter who will never return. He's a fool." Others took the opportunity to remind Okafor of what they had always said. "See, this is what happens when you waste your resources on a girl. She'll never come back. She'll marry some rich man in the city and forget about you." Their words cut deeper than any blade could. Okafor didn't respond to them. He couldn't. He didn't have the strength anymore. Instead, he spent his days sitting outside his hut, staring at the sun as it sank below the horizon, thinking of Adiz. He had not heard from her in months, and with each passing day, the worry in his heart grew. Had she forgotten him? Was she too busy to remember the father who had sacrificed everything for her? The letters had stopped coming. Adiz had become more successful, her studies abroad, her medical program, and her career were taking off. She was traveling the world, attending conferences, receiving accolades. But all the while, Okafor sat alone in his hut, wondering if she was still thinking of him, wondering if the love he had given her was still being returned. One morning, as Okafor sat in his usual spot by the fire, a young boy approached him. The boy was no more than 12, his clothes dusty from the journey, but he had a smile on his face. "Uncle Okafor," the boy called out, his voice bright. "There's a letter for you. From your daughter." The word daughter made Okafor's heart leap in his chest. For the first time in months, he felt alive again. He reached for the letter, his hands shaking as he tore it open. "Papa, I know it's been a long time since I last wrote. I've been very busy with my work, but I think of you every day. I've just been awarded a major medical grant to research healthcare in Africa, and it will require me to travel for a few more years. I know this is hard for you, but please know that I love you more than anything, and one day, I'll come back to you. I will not forget the sacrifices you made for me. Please stay strong, Papa. Keep fighting for us both. Love, Adiz." Okafor's eyes blurred with tears as he finished reading the letter. She loved him. She still loved him. But the distance between them had become a chasm, wider and deeper with every passing day. For the first time in a long while, Okafor allowed himself to cry. The tears that fell were not just for the aching loneliness he felt, but for the truth he had been avoiding for so long. Adiz was never going to return the way he had hoped. She was too successful, too far removed from the life they once shared. The villagers, noticing his tears, took the opportunity to mock him again. "There he goes," one of them sneered. "Crying over a daughter who doesn't even know he's alive anymore." But Okafor didn't care about their words. They didn't matter. What mattered was Adiz's promise, the promise that one day she would come back. Days turned into weeks, and Okafor's health continued to deteriorate. His legs were too weak to walk to the palm fields, and the little money he had left was spent on medicine and food. The once proud man who had dreamed of seeing his daughter become someone great was now a shadow of himself. Yet, every day, he held on to the hope that Adiz would return and make everything right. One evening, as he sat on the porch of his hut, a group of villagers approached him. They were whispering among themselves, but Okafor had no energy to care. He had learned to tune them out long ago. "You know," one of them said loudly, "Okafor's daughter is never coming back. She's too busy living her life in the city. He's just a fool who gave up everything for nothing. Okafor's head snapped up at the mention of Adiz. His eyes were clouded with exhaustion, but his voice was steady when he spoke. You may mock me, he said, his voice hoarse. But one day, Adiz will come back. And when she does, I will be the man who gave everything for her. The villagers laughed, but Okafor didn't care. The belief in his heart was unshakable. His love for Adiz was the only thing that mattered now. She would come back, and when she did, she would know the price he had paid. She would know the love that had kept him going all these years. The next morning, Okafor awoke to find his body aching more than ever. His chest felt tight, his breath shallow. But despite the pain, he smiled. He had one more letter from Adiz to read. The words may have been few, but they were enough. In that letter, there was a promise. The promise that kept him alive. Adiz was still out there, and one day, she would come back. Okafor had not seen another living soul in days. The pain in his body had grown unbearable, and though the villagers still whispered and mocked him behind his back, he had learned to ignore them. He spent his days in solitude, replaying memories of Adiz in his mind. He remembered the way she would laugh as a child, the way her eyes would sparkle with excitement every time she learned something new. He thought of the sacrifices he made for her, the pain he endured to see her succeed. But now, as time wore on, he wondered whether he had made the right choice. He could feel his life slipping away, and Adiz was still so far, so unreachable. The letters had become less frequent, and each time he received one, it seemed like she was further and further from him, consumed by her own life. The hope that had once fueled him began to feel like a distant memory, and he was not sure how much longer he could hold on. It was a humid afternoon when the phone call came. Okafor, sitting in his small, dimly lit hut, was startled by the loud ringing. He was not used to the sound, he hadn't heard a phone ring in years. His heart raced as he staggered to his feet, his old body creaking in protest. He limped toward the small table where his phone lay, trembling with excitement. When he answered, he could barely believe his ears. Papa? The voice on the other end was soft, yet firm. It was Adiz's voice, the same voice he remembered so well, the one that had once filled his heart with joy. Now, it was filled with something else, guilt, maybe. Regret, perhaps. Adiz? Okafor's voice cracked as he spoke her name. Is it really you? Yes, Papa, it's me. I've been so busy. I know I've not written in a long time. I'm sorry. There was a long pause before she continued. Papa, I've been meaning to call you. I've been so caught up in everything, but I realize now how much I've neglected you. I've missed you. I don't know how to explain this. Tears welled up in Okafor's eyes as he held the phone to his ear. He could hear the pain in her voice, the sadness she carried. For years, he had dreamed of hearing from her, of knowing she was thinking of him, and now, here she was, sounding almost as fragile as he felt. I've heard about your achievements, Adiz, Okafor said, his voice shaky. I've heard you're doing well, that you're living the life you always dreamed of. I'm proud of you, my daughter. You've become the woman I always hoped you would be. But His words faltered, and for a moment, he was silent. How could he say the things he truly felt? The pain he had carried for years? The loneliness he had suffered in silence? He had no idea how to express his feelings anymore. He felt like a stranger to her, even though she was still his little girl. I'm so sorry, Papa, Adiz interrupted, her voice thick with emotion. I should have been there for you. I've been so focused on my work, my career, that I lost sight of what truly mattered. I've been selfish. I've left you alone. Please forgive me, Papa. Okafor's heart clenched. The pain of the past 2 decades was not just his to carry, it was hers too. Adise had lived her life, growing more successful with each passing year, but in doing so, she had left her father behind. And now, she was acknowledging it. Her words were a balm to his wounds, but they also opened them even wider. Papa, I want to come back, she continued, her voice breaking. I want to make things right. I want to come home, to be with you. I know I can't undo the past, but I can make up for the time we've lost. I've been so wrong. Okafor's hands trembled as he held the phone tighter, as if afraid that if he let go, this moment would slip away. He wanted to believe her, wanted to hear those words without the nagging fear that they were just another empty promise. But Adise had always been his daughter, his little girl. And now, it seemed, the world had come full circle. She was coming back to him. I'm so sorry, Papa, Adise repeated, her sobs clear now. Please forgive me. Please let me make things right. I'll come back and take care of you. I'll never leave you again. Okafor closed his eyes, allowing the tears to fall freely. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring, or how much longer he had left in this world. But one thing he knew for sure was that the woman on the other end of the phone, the woman who had become everything he had ever dreamed of, was finally returning to him. The girl who had once been mocked and dismissed, the one they all said would amount to nothing, was now a successful, accomplished woman. And she was coming back to him, just as he had always known she would. Come back, Adise, Okafor whispered, his voice filled with both pain and hope. Come back, my daughter. I've waited for you all these years. The day Adise returned to the village, it seemed as though the entire world had changed. The air was different, the sun was brighter, and the villagers who had once mocked Okafor now stood in stunned silence. It wasn't just the sight of Adise that left them speechless, it was the transformation she represented. The little girl they had laughed at was now a woman of great success, a beacon of hope in a world that often felt devoid of it. Adise's luxurious car pulled into the dusty village road, kicking up a cloud of red dust that seemed to hang in the air like the anticipation of something extraordinary. Okafor had been waiting outside his hut for hours, his old body trembling with excitement. He could barely believe this moment was real. After so many years of waiting, so many years of silence, his daughter was finally home. The car came to a stop in front of him, and the door opened. Adise stepped out, looking every bit the woman the villagers had heard about in hushed whispers. Her designer clothes, her expensive sunglasses, and her confident demeanor were all testaments to the life she had built. But it wasn't her wealth or her appearance that made Okafor's heart swell with pride. It was the way she stood there, eyes searching for him, a look of genuine love and sorrow on her face. Papa, Adise whispered, her voice thick with emotion. She took a step forward, then another, until she was standing before him. The tears that had once been held back finally fell freely from her eyes, a mix of relief, guilt, and overwhelming love. Okafor, unable to hold back his own tears, reached out to her with trembling hands. He could barely speak. The years of pain, the years of loneliness, all seemed to melt away in that moment. His daughter, the girl he had fought for, the girl he had sacrificed everything for, was standing before him, not just as a successful woman, but as his daughter, who had come back to him. You're here, Okafor whispered, his voice shaking. You came back. I'm sorry, Papa, Adise choked out, her arms wrapping around him tightly. I'm so sorry for all the time I lost. I should have been here. I should have never let the world take me away from you. Okafor held her close, unable to speak for a moment. All the words he had wanted to say over the years, about the pain, about the sacrifices, about the loneliness, were forgotten in that instant. All that mattered now was the daughter he had fought so hard to raise, the daughter who had come back to him when it seemed like all hope was lost. The villagers, who had gathered to watch the reunion from a distance, could not hide their shock. They had watched Okafor suffer, watched him grow older and weaker, and many had doubted that his sacrifices would ever amount to anything. Now, as they watched Adise kneel in front of her father, her tears mixing with his, they realized the depth of the love that had carried Okafor through the years. Adise pulled away slightly, her hands still on her father's shoulders as she looked into his eyes. "Papa," she said softly, "I've built a life, a career, but I know that none of it would be possible without you. You gave me everything. And I've been selfish. I should have been here. I should have made time for you." Okafor shook his head, his voice barely audible. "No, my daughter. You've done more than I could have ever dreamed. You've become everything I hoped for and more. You've made me proud." The villagers, watching from the sidelines, were now whispering to one another. The same people who had once mocked Okafor for his decision to invest everything in his daughter were now seeing the result of his unwavering belief. Adise was not just successful in her career, she was the embodiment of the dreams and sacrifices of a father who had given up everything for her. Adise turned to the villagers, her eyes filled with both anger and pity. "I don't think you all understand," she began, her voice strong but emotional. "My father didn't just send me to school. He gave me everything, his sweat, his blood, his dreams. While you laughed at him, he never stopped believing in me. He sacrificed his health, his wealth, and his happiness to see me become who I am. And now, you see the result of that love." The villagers, once so certain in their mockery, were now humbled. They could not argue with the truth that Adise spoke. The woman standing before them was a testament to Okafor's sacrifice, his love, and his unwavering belief that his daughter was worth every bit of the struggle. Adise turned back to her father, her voice softer now, filled with warmth. "Papa, I'm home. And I promise you, I'm never leaving you again." Okafor, his heart full, finally spoke. "My daughter, you've done more than I ever could have hoped. I am proud of you. And you are my greatest reward." The sun was beginning to set, casting a golden glow over the village. In that moment, as Adise held her father close, surrounded by the villagers who now understood the depth of Okafor's sacrifices, it felt as though time itself had stopped. The years of pain, of loneliness, of ridicule, were now behind them. The love they shared, a love that had withstood every trial and every test, was stronger than ever. Okafor had waited 20 long years for this moment. He had sacrificed everything for it. And now, as he stood in the arms of his daughter, he knew that his dreams had come true. Not because of the wealth Adise had accumulated or the recognition she had received, but because, after all the struggles, she had come home. Together, they stood in the fading light, father and daughter, with the promise of a new beginning. What do you think? Do you believe that true success comes from the sacrifices we make for the ones we love, or do you think it's all about hard work and ambition? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you've ever had a moment where someone believed in you when no one else did, share your story with us. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on more emotional stories like this.